Sprite Comics, webcomics that mostly consist of computer sprites ripped from video games, all cobbled together by amateur comic artists. You'll find plenty of Mega Man, Sonic the Hedgehog, Final Fantasy, and oddly enough, they outnumber Nintendo Sprite Comics. I guess that's one thing Sega does that Nintendo don't.
What Nintendo don't.
That said, neglected Mario characters are exactly where Sprite Comics got their start. Nestled away on an old Nintendo fan site, Super Mario Bros. Headquarters, the concept of using someone else's pixel art for your own was born. A staple of online comics culture, one of the classic genres of webcomics, and the bane of video game copyright lawyers everywhere. But hey, in the history of webcomics, what isn't infringing at least a little? But for once, this story isn't about legal battles between the corporate powers that be and a scrunkly little 90s comic made by a middle schooler. No, the main villain of this story is the longtime evil of the entire internet. Ads. The encroaching force that consumes a website, slowly becoming the main focus while the content drowns in a sea of pop-ups and in-text links. And don't get me wrong, the aptly named Neglected Mario Characters comics ran into their fair share of other obstacles. Even though they were first on the scene, they had to fight external battles against far more popular newcomers, internal struggles between creators, and racing against the almighty hand of time. It's a series that's no masterpiece. A lot of the jokes will make you cringe rather than laugh, the storytelling can be flippant, but when you read it, you almost feel like a kid again, mashing your officially licensed toys together, giving them unhinged personalities, and making them do, well, whatever's funniest to your developing brain. Once I accepted that, I kinda got invested in Neglected Mario Characters, and I was sad to see its slow, drawn-out downfall. Not because of a dip in quality, but because people grew up and, well, their priorities changed. Its lasting legacy in the world of webcomics ended up as a cautionary tale to always put passion before profit. Today on Zombie Comics, we're resurrecting Neglected Mario Characters by Jay Resop. Go ahead and subscribe if artist interviews, webcomic, and internet history are your thing, like the video, and tell me about your favorite fan site in the comments. I know they're a dying breed nowadays, but hey, they're still out there. And with that, let's get into the rise and fall of Neglected Mario Characters. At Space World 1995, Nintendo unveiled a preview of Super Mario 64, pulling old Jumpman up from 8-bit graphics into the third dimension. An ocean away in Tacoma Park, Maryland, 13-year-old gaming enthusiast Kyle Orland tuned into the gaming showcase to see the polygonal plumber. His family had recently gotten an AOL account, and he used it at every opportunity to ravenously consume gaming news from AOL's gaming channel or N64.com. But as you racked up $10 in hourly usage fees to download a grainy, postage stamp-sized preview of Super Mario 64, the new reality set in. Gone were the days of waiting for monthly gaming magazines like Nintendo Power. Now Orland could get new info daily. The way we consumed gaming news wasn't the only thing changing, so was how fans interacted with each other. Fandom had existed prior to the internet, but it was mostly limited to comic conventions and events like film releases. In the online age, well, now your fellow nerd was a few key clicks away, and the best place to find them was fan sites. Want to connect with NES enthusiasts? Try TSR's NES archive. Into RPGs? RPGgamer.com was the unofficial Squaresoft homepage. But what about for fans of the good old Super Mario Bros? Well, offerings weren't all that great, at least not for Orland's taste. He had his friend Jay Resop to nerd out with. They'd met in middle school thanks to Jay's mom teaching Orland's history class in 6th grade, but he wanted more. One day, as Resop recalled, Orland, with the sun shining on his face from the window and with a flare in his eye, standing tall upon one of the desks, and after crossing his heart with a fist, said something like, "I'm going to make me a Super Mario Bros. Webpage." Now, I forgot exactly, but the first thing that came into my mind after that was, what's a webpage? And thus, the dream to create the Super Mario Bros. Headquarters was born. A site for everything from info on Mario games to obscure Mario media and Mario news. Orland initially considered making a massive site about Nintendo as a whole, but even in '95, there were tons of sites for that. He considered a site for video game mascots, but back then, who would be included besides Mario and Sonic? Bubsy? Gex?
What could possibly go wrong?
He settled on a Mario-centric site. It's what he and Resop obsessed over. Things didn't come together before they graduated, though. Orland went off to Montgomery Blair High School, while Resop went to Poolesville High School. But the dream lived on. They stayed in touch through letters and, of course, over the internet. Life went on for the two. For months and months, Resop heard Orland talk about making the page, but it was never anything serious. Until one fateful day when Resop received a simple message. The webpage is up. Armed with a copy of Learn HTML in 21 Days he got for Hanukkah in '95, Orland began work on the site in May 1997. Finally working up the courage to launch SMBHQ in August on the 5 megabytes of personal web space provided by AOL. The first visitor, outside of Orland himself, was his friend Ashutosh, who received the link from Orland via AIM. No, wrong one, not the Marvel Comics AIM, I'm talking about AOL Instant Messenger. And hey, if you think social media is bad about preying on our serotonin-addicted brains with likes and upvotes, don't worry, that shit was there on the early internet too. Just in a different form. The visitor counter was a feature on plenty of 90s websites. Before site traffic was measured in the millions, you could see what number visitor you were with these little odometer-like doohickeys. Of course, on the other side of the screen, monkey see number go up, monkey happy.
Monkey.
I don't really remember much about what the first SMBHQ looked like, Resop recalled in a co-written post, but I remember that it was very quiet. Orland wanted to boost that number any way he could. He traded links with every willing video game site and made sure to update at least once a week to get people to come back regularly. His biggest boon, though, would be his fellow contributors. Sean Kelly, Metalman88, Cody Kitty, and Peachfan all played important roles throughout the website's life. Several amateur editors, artists, and writers would head up different sections of the website, providing strategy guides, character bios, fanfiction. Super Smash Stadium matchups provided spirited debates. Sean Kelly acted as the editor for Mario Mysteries, a section that probed into the more confusing aspects of Mario's past. But Jay Resop would prove to be Orland's most valuable asset. Resop frequently visited the site to support his friend, and because he was curious about the possibilities this newfangled website business held. So he started talking to Orland about ideas for the page. He wanted to see pictures, polls, but one idea stuck out. Of all my ideas, one seemed special in a way, he recalled. When I told the idea to Kyle, he thought it was interesting, but he didn't know where to start with it, so he wanted me to write it. And so began Neglected Characters. Resop launched Neglected Mario Characters, later shortened to just Neglected Characters, on September 6, 1997, about a month after SMBHQ went live, and would quickly become one of, if not the main attraction. The comics follow a gang of lesser appreciated Mario characters as they hatch various schemes to overthrow the more popular Mario, attempt world domination, and rescue/fight their own artists and editors at SMBHQ. Their adventures took them to other worlds, other realms like Subcon, the dreamlike setting of Mario Bros. 2, Neglected Characters Land, a crossroad of neglected characters across all video games, Popstar from the Kirby series, and plenty more. The first comics take place after Super Mario Bros. 3, as Mario defeats Bowser and rescues Princess Peach. Luigi suddenly shows up and he's the first major antagonist of the series? Okay. And also changes his name to Lord Butch. And he and Mario fight with lightsabers. Okay, just to reiterate, these comics are 100% being written by a recently graduated middle schooler, and it shows. But this first Evil Luigi arc laid the groundwork for the series' run up until... Jesus Christ, what do you mean it ran until 2011? Well, let's get to reading. The second arc is the Mushroom Wars, and it's a soft reset. Luigi's back. He teams up with Bowser to take out the Koopalings, calling themselves the Dual Alliance of Death. Lemmy and Wendy Koopa own a restaurant called the Koopa Cafe. Half the comics in this arc are just text. They fight, blah blah blah, and the world explodes. Oh, and Sonic the Hedgehog is here. It definitely gets a little fanfiction-y. Okay, a lot fanfiction-y. The second I read the line, "Meanwhile, somewhere between dimensions," and Sonic the Hedgehog said, "What the heck are you?" to Crash Bandicoot, well, I knew what we were dealing with. The series sort of zooms out from these first two arcs to become a meta-narrative following two of the smaller characters that appeared, Fred the Spaniard and Bill the Extra Guy. They kinda set the standard for Sprite comic characters. Palette swap versions of existing characters with new names, new personalities, and new powers that help them stand out from all the pre-existing characters. More often than not, it's these more original guys that become most popular in Sprite comic series. Fred uses a palette swap sprite of Bugsy from the Kirby games, and tends to be the more trigger-happy of the two, constantly using his deathly death ray of deathly deathness to solve problems. But he also went to law school. He was born on the small island of Span on Popstar, Kirby's homeworld, grew up to declare himself dictator before being ejected into space by Kirby's father, Jerby? What am I reading? He eventually landed in Mushroom World and found himself tangled in the various Bowser vs. Mario feuds. It all started with a conversation between a Neglected Characters fan and myself, Resop wrote. I don't know where the conversation went, but somehow I convinced him that there was a secret character in Super Mario Bros. 3. I came up with the name Fred the Spaniard because it sounded funny, but I spelt it Fred the Spaniard just to make it more stupid. Because I had this fake character, I decided to use him. So I used a picture of a boss from Kirby's Adventure, and Fred made his first appearance in Neglected Characters comic number 3. A Kirby sprite might seem a bit random for a series called Neglected Mario Characters, but it makes sense once you find out that Resop just really liked Kirby. He ran another site, Kirby HQ, even if that was much shorter lived than Super Mario Bros. HQ. Bill, more often than not, plays the straight man in their dynamic. He uses a Pidget sprite from Mario 2, and despite being much less of a fighter than Fred, is considered one of the most powerful beings in the world, because he possesses an extra power, foretold before his birth, or hatching, by the secret order of Rubisco? What is that? Is that a brand? What the hell? However, Bill would eventually work for Wart in Subcon, where he grew a resentment for Mario after one too many encounters with the Red Devil. And unfortunately, he'd become stuck there after Nintendo banished him and the rest of the Mario 2 enemies due to poor sales, meaning he'd have to break out of Subcon. When he finally escaped, he ran into Fred scamming a hotel, and soon they became friends. These two original characters, Do Not Steal, started out as background gags in the Evil Luigi arc, but quickly grew popular with Resop's readership. So much so that the entire third arc of the series is devoted to them killing Resop himself, and Orland coming after them for ruining the most popular thing to come out of SMBHQ. In a title riffing on Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Bill and Fred's Quasi-Mediocre Adventure.
Excellent!
This storyline introduces the third major original character, Dr. Dones, an overly dramatic genius with 5 PhDs, an IQ of 171, and an old law schoolmate of Fred. With goals of taking over the world, he'd form a rivalry with another schoolmate in medical school, Professor Executrain.
What are we gonna do tomorrow night?
Try to take over the world!
In the comic's heyday, Dr. Dones had his own column titled Ask Dr. Dones, in which he would answer any questions sent via email and often provide bizarre advice and commentary for them. There's a few other characters original to the series, like Lemmy the Lemming. He got his own spin-off, thanks to Cody Kitty making her own Sprite Comics, even if they haven't been preserved as well as they could. Then you had Phone the Clone, a palette swap of Toad, Jill the Extra Gal, who makes for a perfect pairing with Fred, I guess. Jay Resop himself, along with his similarly named brothers. Mario's got a superhero split personality called Citrus Man. Moon Knight Eats Your Heart Out. When you read this series, you really do get a sense that this was basically a kid playing with his toys. And as cringy as it can be sometimes, it's oddly nostalgic. And the jokes did improve over time. I like the gag of the character Captain Churro shouting, "Fly away," to announce his exit, but he can't actually fly, so he just runs off panel. Like, you know how the Lego Movie was about a kid making this random toy the main character and mixing him in with Batman and Gandalf the Grey?
And Gandalf the White.
And all the pop culture references he knew? Even though I never read these Sprite comics growing up, they still kinda make me think back on just messing around as a kid. By the time Bill and Fred's quasi-mediocre adventure wrapped up, neglected Mario characters and Super Mario Bros. HQ soared past the apocalyptic Y2K. And Resop had a new story in mind for the turn of the millennium, but he'd need some help from his fellow editors over at SSS. Sometime in 1998, Orland started a small corner of Super Mario Bros. HQ that would eventually evolve into the Super Smash Stadium. A reader on the message boards gave him the idea to pit NPCs against each other in Super Smash Bros. And spin a narrative about how the match went down, complete with announcers and contestant banter, all set in the world of Smashtopia. Though it wasn't always strictly official characters fighting. Characters from outside video games would get involved, or even the superpowers, the people who wrote Super Smash Stadium like Orland, Patrick Van Dusen, Cody Kitty, and VG Warrior. And in 2001, Super Smash Stadium and Neglected Characters had a crossover. The escapade teamed Patrick Van Dusen and VG Warrior up with Bill, Fred, Dr. Dones, and Resop himself. In one version, they fought a half-Toad, half-Bowser monstrosity, but since that one wasn't very well received, in another version, Bill, Fred, and Dr. Dones took off for a vacation to Smashtopia just in time for Resop to be kidnapped, though not before he dispatched a messenger. The initial run of this second version, dubbed the NCSSS Crossover Mach 2, ran until June 2006 and featured more gags, more collabs, more Bill and Fred, more everything. There was just one problem. The original creator had less and less time for the comic as life went on. Jay Resop fully intended to keep contributing to these projects, but he just couldn't keep up with school and making comics. So they trudged on without him, under various other creators like Sean Kelly, Lord Reed, Metal Man, Alf, Pat Van Dusen, and Crazy Swordsman, to varying degrees of success. See, neglected Mario characters always meandered, rambled, and felt aimless under Resop, but I noticed it got a lot worse without him. Lord Reed took over the crossover and introduced tons of new characters. The gag of Mario having a split personality snowballed into Bowser, Wart, and Pauline getting their own and forming the Just Us League, only for them to barely connect into the already increasingly complicated story. There seemed to be 10 times more, "we're going to a place, but instead of ever getting there, here's 8 chapters over the course of 2 years with 0 progress." So all this build-up, new characters, what was the final resolution? Well, there was none. It stopped at part 12 on June 18th, 2006 with nothing resolved. The unofficial Indefinite Hiatus had begun. Super Mario Bros. HQ as a whole expanded far beyond anything anyone expected. Many of the editors took advantage of their newfound fame in the gaming space. Sean Kelly launched a blog for the site, Peach Fan took things offline, announcing that she'd be at Icon in her Princess Peach cosplay, Metalman88 had taken up Super Smash Quest, and Resop took to forums to keep people updated about life in the site. And naturally, Orland most of all wanted to capitalize on the site's popularity. That little visitor counter ticked up and up and up. The site really took off when it was prominently listed on DMOZ's Open Directory project. And beyond that, it was even mentioned in the May 2001 issue of Nintendo Power, and the February 2006 issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly. Orland was checking his AOL email daily instead of weekly. He was being treated like an authority on all things Super Mario Bros. With this much attention and numbers this big, Orland smelled blood in the water.
That's good.
There was money to be made. He admitted in a 2014 article from Ars Technica that he joined quite a few early ad networks, none of which seemed to pay as well as they promised, and even resorted to those skeezy in-text ad links, double green underlines and all, to squeeze some pizza money out of his hobby. And thus, Super Mario Bros. HQ stepped into a new era. For better or worse.
You've changed, and not entirely for the better, Bilbo Baggins.
Metalman 88 and Cody Kitty were wary of these changes, to say the least, and in the long run, rightfully so. The fact is, a lot of changes came around 2004. No longer were these a bunch of middle schoolers and high schoolers working on a fan site. They were going to college, taking on bigger and bigger responsibilities. Orland became more and more inactive on the site, leaving most of it to Resop. But Jay had his sights on not just higher education, but following in the footsteps of Dr. Dones and getting his PhD, which is no small task and leaves very little room for side projects. He had a new apartment to take care of and not so great internet to boot. In the words of Metal Man, this was a major potential disaster for the website and comic. So, Sean Kelly, editor of Mario Mysteries, was promoted to become webmaster of the site to help run the ins and outs. But what was even more mysterious was his section had gone inactive, Metal Man stated. Kyle Orland was promoting someone who couldn't even keep their own section active to head of Super Mario Bros. HQ. But apparently he didn't notice. Instead, he paid Sean Kelly to keep the place afloat. And to pay him, ads on the site were expanded even more. Super Mario Bros. HQ was suddenly experiencing their own adpocalypse. The section editors, unused to ads, questioned this, Metal Man said, but freshly minted head of SMBHQ, Sean Kelly, had nothing to say about it. He just pushed more people to put the ads on their pages, including people who had little experience with HTML. Jay tried to aid these people, but it was in vain. And this, of course, diverted more of what little free time he had away from his comic. From summer 2006 to Christmas 2007, the series went on its unofficial, indefinite hiatus, leaving it a little, well, neglected. December 27th, 2007. After a year and a half with barely a peep about the world's oldest known Sprite comic, it returned under Sean Kelly for a Christmas special. And what's more, announced the return of Jay Resop to the series. Which is great, because last we saw, Fred embarked on a journey of enlightenment to Mount Infinity, and over the course of the next 9 episodes in 2 years, still never arrived. The other ongoing project was Lord of the Wings, a parody of, well. So, Jay Resop was back. The series got its second breath, and he never found the time to continue either comic arc. No next Lord of the Wings, and no NCSSS Mach 2 Part 13. The 2007 Christmas special marks less of a return and more of a final reunion. After Lord of the Wings had nearly a 4-year dry spell, Crazy Swordsman took matters into his own hands in January 2008 to continue Lord of the Wings and the Tale of the Fellowship, and confirmed that Captain Churro f***s. Alf launched a story about a zombie apocalypse, and never finished it. Metal Man began the long-awaited sequel to Bill and Fred's quasi-mediocre adventure, and never finished it. Are you starting to see a pattern? Sure, there were always other editors and creators involved, but without Jay Resop, it's like the very fabric of the Neglected Characters comics was dissolving. Even the Neglected Characters shorts, smaller sectioned adventures of the cast, started running dry. All the while, the situation on Super Mario Bros. HQ as a whole just kept getting worse. Orland and Sean Kelly hadn't let up on pushing the invasive ads on all of the subsections of the site, and they were bleeding regular visitors. Something had to change, and fast, if they wanted to salvage the host site, Neglected Characters, Super Smash Stadium, and everything else. Something that took them back to the roots. Something like Mario eras. Rather than boosting the sections SMBHQ already had, Orland instead hatched the scheme entitled Mario Eras, a new Mario site, one based on all things Mario information. After all, that's what the site originally started as. A catalog of everything Mario. Wasting no time, Orland set Sean Kelly on this hefty undertaking. He started with the retro era in September 2004 and toiled away at it into 2005, vowing that he'd have the era pages up and running by the year's end. But even in the early 2000s, That was more than 20 years worth of info on the world's most popular and produced video game character, with tons more dropping every year. How was one guy supposed to manage this? Other Mario fan sites like the Mushroom Kingdom had much more manpower, and nothing could contend with the Mario Wiki on the horizon in 2007. As the months ticked by and Sean Kelly toiled fruitlessly at the Mario Eras pages, Orland grew impatient. Kyle Orland has been wanting me to get the era pages ready, and I have been trying to concentrate on that, Sean Kelly wrote in an April 2005 blog post. There is also the fact that I tend to be lazy at times, and the fact that I hate it when a website that I do for a hobby feels like a job. Kyle wanted Mario Eras, Metal Man wrote, and so he prodded Sean on, such that Sean himself lost passion for the site. What little of it remained, that is. Like, seriously, look at this! Not just a list of every game Mario ever appeared in, including cameos, but they really expected every single one to have stats like release date, current price, story breakdowns, gameplay, reviews, guides, and codes written by one person? This scheme was doomed from the start. On March 28, 2007, 4 months before Super Mario Bros. HQ's 10th anniversary and 2 weeks before his 25th birthday, Sean Kelly announced on the blog that he was stepping down as webmaster. Orland wanted someone who could run his site, and Sean Kelly was not cutting it, especially as someone paid to do it. Sean Kelly had enrolled at York University in Toronto to pursue a bachelor's degree in information technology in 2005, and just like Resop, he didn't have all that much extra time for the site. In his place, Metal Man was promoted to webmaster, only for Sean Kelly to return 4 hours later. Not like a it was only like 4 hours, it was literally 4 hours. So, on one hand, nothing changed. On the other, things just kept getting worse. Super Mario Bros. HQ was increasingly riddled with ads, like, "Thanks for visiting this Mario site, wanna play poker? Hey, visit this poker site." It was getting bad. Visitors weren't visiting like they used to, and editors were leaving over the greedy changes.
This deal's getting worse all the time.
Neglected Mario characters lulled into yet another hiatus after Crazy Swordsman finished Lord of the Rings, finished covering at least Fellowship of the Ring. There was some activity. The 2008 Neglected Characters election. Oh, sorry, did I forget to mention those? Yeah, so every 4 years, various characters from the comic would run for president, complete with political campaigns, parties, and what have you. It would even get mentioned within the comics themselves on occasion. In 2000, Bill was elected official president of Neglected Characters, and in 2004, Captain Churro took home the presidency. And in 2008, Metal Man himself was elected? So, at least the comic had something going on, though it wasn't much. On September 24th, 2010, Metal Man would write an unofficial obituary for Super Mario Bros. HQ, retelling the tale of the site getting dragged forward, its diseased corpse long rotted away. The main page was remade multiple times, and each time the guest sections were made less important. Sean seemed to forget they existed, Metal Man said. The site lost viewers and the ads became less profitable. But Kyle had a solution. More ads. Soon, Intellitek's ads graced every page. What little remained of the guest editors vanished after this. I and Cody Kitty packed our bags and left, disgusted with the ads. Super Smash Bros. Stadium remained as the sole fan section, surviving mostly due to its stubborn staff member, Pat, locking out the ads behind Sean Kelly's back. Sean Kelly worked for years on end and changed the front page multiple times, but nobody cared. There was nothing to see on Super Mario Bros. HQ anymore. The meltdown continued, the years passed, and the last embers of Neglected Characters, Jay's section, and the section which had truly kept the site alive back when he ran it, died. But the site continued anyway. Kyle continued placing ads on the corpse, while even Sean began to question the point of it all. He asked about it on the forums, where it became clear. Nobody ever looked at Super Mario Bros. Headquarters anymore. It was a relic from the early 2000s. The lack of real updates had killed it as early as 2006. And the salt in the wound? The final president of Neglected Characters was a poker machine. Real nice. And so, after many, many years of neglect and abuse, SMBHQ itself was declared over. But like a ghost chained to this reality from unfinished business, Metal Man had more to do. Former Super Mario Bros. HQ contributor Metal Man rescued the world's oldest known Sprite comic. With the old site dead, they mirrored every single weird, cringy character, joke, and plotline. Fred the Spaniard, Bill the Extra Guy, Dr. Dones, the Evil Luigi arc, the Lore Chronicles, even the late-stage unfinished comics were here for people like you to look back at webcomic history. It's a strange little time capsule from the 90s and early 2000s. It's just a shame that one of its biggest stories never got a conclusion. That is until January 2011. Nearly 5 years since its unofficial Indefinite hiatus, neglected Mario characters got one last update. The long-awaited Neglected Characters Super Smash Stadium Mach 2 Part 13. Metal Man and Pat Van Dusen dug back into the rusty series, dusted it off, and gave Bill, Fred, Dr. Dones, and the whole cast one last push, one final hurrah, wrapping up every loose end, dangling thread, and solving every last mystery. Fred reached enlightenment, they rescued Bill, they defeated the villains. It makes the pacing of the entire series so bad, but some ending is better than being doomed to an eternal cliffhanger. It was one final gift to the fans who were left. No ads, no drama, just, hey, remember that old comic? Here's the ending. And where did everyone land in the wake of this old fan site? Well, Orland went on to write gaming and tech news as a career. Both Metal Man and Cody Kitty continued running their own personal websites long after SMBHQ. And hey, you know how I said the Lemmy the Lemming prequel wasn't preserved very well? You can find it all crisp and clean over on her website, safe and sound. And as for Jay Resop, he finished his PhD and joined the University of Maryland's Center for Geospatial Information Science in 2013. Not bad for starting out as a little Mario gamer making fan comics. Neglected Mario characters may have been the first Sprite comic ever created, but it never truly broke into the mainstream like Bob and George or 8-bit theater. Its slow decline is more painful than anything else. But at its heart, it preserves a sense of play. As kids, we smack our licensed toys together with reckless abandon. We give them new voices, new personalities, whatever is funniest or cool to us. Instead of worrying about how these comics would be received, they were just a bunch of guys and girls having fun. And you can see that when you read these comics. Metal Man ended his Super Mario Bros. HQ obituary with a desperate plea, saying, "I write this as a message to would-be webmasters elsewhere. If you have a site that gets big, do not sell out. Do not throw away what it does best for something everyone else is fighting over. Your reward will not be cash, nor will it be fame. You will not get anything. You will get Super Mario Bros. HQ, a bloated, ad-infested carcass of a once great site." Could neglected Mario characters and SMBHQ still be around had passion taken priority over profit? Who's to say? But at least Fred, Bill, and the rest of the neglected characters got their moment in the sun, and, for a time, weren't quite so neglected.